And everybody just hang on, because this is going to be extremely interesting, and I think extremely exciting for all of us. Our guest tonight, and I have been pronouncing his name wrong for several days, but our guest tonight is Michael, and it's pronounced Tsarion. Is that right, Michael?
Yep, that's exactly right.
The T is pronounced, everybody. It is spelled Tsarion. See, in New Jersey, we wouldn't pronounce the T, Michael. But, Michael, you are so prolific in your writing, and obviously all of the stuff you write about is all the stuff that we are all interested in. So you have a captive audience tonight who is waiting with bated breath to learn some of the things that you know.
Well, that's great to hear, and that pretty much is the way it's been since I've come to America. You know, my work focuses a lot, as you know, on the Celtic legends. And
right.
The paradox is exactly what you brought out. I come to America and find completely committed, dedicated, very, very ardent interest, researchers, been very welcomed. And in my own country in Ireland, where this subject comes from, nobody could care less. You have to be away from the mountain, as they say.
You're kidding.
People over here are much more interested in their roots, in looking into the great mysteries. They're open-minded to the metaphysical aspects of it. But Ireland itself, especially Belfast, where I'm from, is still so narrow-minded and closed-minded because they've had, you know what, thousands of years of Christian upbringing.
Sure.
And not to knock it, but, you know, it does have its consequences, and it's very limited.
Michael, in your upbringing, I mean, what made you, I guess, have this interest and step out from everybody else? Because, I do understand, you know, either whether it's Catholic or Protestant, the stuff that you're into, there cannot be a lot of interested people over there, as far as I know.
No, you're absolutely right. You do have your subculture, obviously, the people that, you know, like myself, are into it, but they are an incredibly small minority. And, you know, for instance, clairvoyance. I know that many of your listeners might be, you know, psychic or clairvoyant.
Sure.
It's not that way now, but see, through the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was illegal to post an advertisement in any newspaper or magazine in the north of Ireland featuring your clairvoyant work. So that should give you some idea of what it was like. Of course, it's changed now, but that's the way it used to be when I grew up there. So what got me into it was that two things. One is that it's such an incredibly violent place, as you and your audience knows.
Sure.
It's a place of incredible human injustice daily. I mean, you've had 9/11 here, so you've had a bit of a taste of what we have to go through there pretty much every day. You know, there's a reason why people jump out of their seat every time the phone rings over there, because of the tremendous injustice and the violence and what have you. And I'm not taking either side. I'm just saying, you know, that's the reality since 1690. That's what we've been living through. So, but then, in order to try and not get involved in that, because in my school, my friends, they're either dead or in jail. There's only two options there in Ireland. You either get involved with this and you become involved with the paramilitary and the terrorism and the death, or you don't. And my idea was, of course, not to do that. And that's how I basically discovered the other Ireland, the Ireland that most people, it's invisible to them, the Ireland of their ancient forefathers, which includes England too, of course, when we're talking about the Arthurian tradition or the Druidic tradition. We're not just talking Ireland here. We're talking north of France. We're talking about the Celts. We're talking about certainly the Scottish and the Welsh. So I started to go out into the field and start to actually study these ancient relics, these monuments, take measurements, and go out there. And I'm not actually that good at mathematics, so I went with a friend of mine who had the compasses and the protractors and the maps and all the rest of the gear. You know, he had that all in his backpack.
Sure.
I kind of made him carry all of that. So we went out there, and I kind of was more of the right brain kind of person, you know.
Right.
So we used to fight the elements and the weather and go out to these incredible ancient sites and piece together, him from a left brain and me from a right brain. And it started to dawn on us that, hold on a minute, something is really not right with the official histories, because there is no way that these incredible structures, many of which are aligned to constellations and celestial events, there is no way that these were, you know, built by the people that we're told existed back then. People running around in the skins, you know, who were shivering in the dark, and hunter-gatherers and starving to death. These so-called primitive people, that just didn't cut it anymore. So gradually, slowly, slowly, from the time I was about 13, it started to dawn on me that we are not being told the truth. And I have, maybe it's my Irish blood, I do have the guts to stand up against the status quo and go, you're wrong. I don't care how many books you throw at me. I don't care how many schools and colleges and teachers and, encyclopedias and textbooks you throw at me. You're wrong. This does not cut it with the evidence of common sense.
Good. Yeah. Now, Michael, how long have you been over in the States, and how did you leave from Ireland and come right over here, or did you go?
It's been back and forth. I'm actually very much my grandfather was a world teacher. His name is Tara Singh, and he had an ashram.
Oh, sure, right, sure.
Yeah, teaching the Course in Miracles.
Yep.
He is actually my grandfather. So we came over pretty much under the auspices of his order, his metaphysical mystery school.
Yeah, sure.
And more than close to him, I was actually close to his mentor, one of the pioneers in the mystery school tradition of America, a man called the Reverend Paul Solomon. And he was a great clairvoyant. He was called the second Edgar Casey, and he sadly has passed away. But his organization was called the Fellowship of Inner Light. And along with my grandfather's movement and people like Keith Critchlow and Sir George Trevelyan and what have you. And I was part of that community from a very, very young age, because my mother was a world-famous clairvoyant from India. And was world famous, so we came back and forth a lot through that, But the only trouble with that, of course, is that when you're around such illustrious, people,
right?
The Jerry Jampolskys and the different academes, Edgar G. Mitchell of the Noetic Institute. Unfortunately, when you kind of grow up around these people, the emphasis is on trying to find your own voice and not just be an echo box of somebody else. So the pressure's kind of on you to say, okay, you're not just going to sit under these mushrooms and meditate all day in these ashrams.
Right.
You've got to go out and find your own, your own voice.
Well, that's
exactly what happened.
Yeah. Just as an aside, what do you think of the Course in Miracles?
I tell you, Alex, really honestly, I love it. It's been part of my life. It's hard to put into words because it's been so much part of my life.
Yep.
It's one of those things that's been the center of my life. Personally speaking, I'm not too keen on the fact that they are using the God idea overly. So this is purely personal now, right? And it's not really a critique, because the beauty of the book is so intense that this is a very minor critique. But as we approach the end of the Piscean age, and I'm saying that because I know that you guys understand what I mean here.
Oh, yeah.
As we move out of the Piscean age and into the Aquarian age, we've got to really drop this whole displaced idea of spirituality, being outside of the self. So even though I understand why they wrote the book that way, and I don't really have a problem with it, because they do obviously define God as the higher force. It's not just the boring old Judeo-Christian, fabricated lie.
Right.
The Course in Miracles makes it clear that that's not what they're talking about. But even so, the very idea that you're still talking about some presence external to the self, the higher self, to me is a little bit, off-putting. But other than that, it's fantastic, and it's something that definitely should be in the lives of most people. It ties in very beautifully to the work of, Byron Katie. People are getting introduced to her work. Well, her work comes very much out of the Course in Miracles tradition,
Let me ask you a question, and only because I am so familiar with the initial, initial start of the Course in Miracles, which is
with Helen Schickman.
Interesting story in itself. But have you, and it's probably an unfair question, but have you, Michael, read the Course in Miracles by yourself, without instructions, without classes, without other people telling you what it means? Have you read it all by yourself?
You're a great man. I love you. Absolutely. And I know what you're getting at, and I totally support it, because this thing became cult. It became vogue.
Yeah.
It became a whole other little bandwagon thing. And I agree with you totally, as Krishnamurti had already been saying when he was alive, that the very fact that it has become a collective thing, and we're all running down the street to the local guru who's going to explain it all, is already part of the problem.
Yep.
So absolutely, I couldn't see the meaning of it, actually, when I was a very young person and it first came into my life. I couldn't see what it was saying at all. And the reason is because everybody else was doing readings from morning to night. I grew up in a community that basically read it from morning to night, constantly pontificating and commenting on it. And I just wanted to get rid of all of those voices so I could say, what is this thing for itself,
Good.
And finally I have done that. Yes, I have. In fact, I have the thing right here in front of me. It's amazing you should bring that up, because I have the new compendium version, which is all of the 3-in-1.
Yes, right.
And, I'm never far away from that, because it's so spiritually helpful.
Yeah. Let me tell you a story some of my listeners have heard. I haven't told it in a long time, but it shows you what ego can do to you. Many years ago, and from what you're saying, you were just a little boy, back in the mid-'60s, myself and 2 other people started a program called Silva Mind Control. And from that, after several years, I just couldn't handle working with them, so I went off on my own, and I had a course called Mind Development. Used to teach all over the world. Had 27 different instructors that worked with me. And I used to have an institute in New York City. Well, I moved away from New York, and one thing led to another, traveled all around the United States, Canada, blah, blah, and went back and visited New York. One of my dearest friends had passed on. He was an older gentleman, but he was just one of my dearest friends. I was in my 20s. He was in his 70s. And I went and stayed with his wife for, I guess, several weeks or maybe a couple of months. And one night, her name is Polly, that's all I'll say. Polly came home with a whole bunch of papers. And she said, "I'd like you to read something and tell me what you think of it." So she had and all I remember is the size of the papers, Michael, were like 11 by 14, not 8.5 by 11, but bigger, with large print and what have you. So I started reading, and I said, "Well, Polly, that's what I teach."
Right.
It was the original manuscript for A Course in Miracles. And
it was already familiar to you?
No, only the concepts, because that's what I had been teaching for 10 or 15 years.
Right, the concepts, that's what it was, yes.
And I thought I was such a smart ass that I flippantly said, "Oh, well, this is what I teach too," and never followed up on it. Now that's an example where God was guiding the course away from somebody as dumb as me.
It happens. You see, that's part of the course. The course is not just reading the text of the book. The course is our relationship with the book, our coming to it, our moving away from it, our picking it up, and our putting it down. They make this very clear that the whole thing is part of the course. Not just your reading of the text and meditating on the text. It's also your contradiction of the text. This is none of these things that are theological tomes. Any book that is put before us as a holy book, you have to be already very skeptical, and you must do your best to contradict everything that it says in it, because that's what the book is actually telling you. If the book is half decent as a spiritual manifesto, it will be asking you to do that. It will be asking you to doubt and to use your critical reason,
Yeah, absolutely.
As well as your faith and your belief.
Well, I can say this, that it had, once I did read it, and when I read it, then I realized what it was that I was reading, because nobody told me, "Oh, this is something that you saw many years ago." But that book has had a profound effect on my life.
I think that people should. I've recommended people to have it, even though I know they're not readers. And I say, look, this is a book that when you're just sitting of an evening, and you just open it randomly, pick a number, or just pick a number, because the lessons are all numbered. So I just tell people, get up in the morning, just open it randomly, there's your message for the day. Or when you come up with a number in your head, just open it at the relative page. Use it purely as a reference book, and already it's going to come alive. There's certain books that you can do that with, and The Course in Miracles is one of them. So somebody doesn't just have to sit down and start reading it from A to Z in this formative way, These things are eclectic, and they require a relationship. It very much strikes at this philosophy that I have about the inanimate objects can also be fallen in love with. In the Western world, we are so able to only create emotional connections with other human beings because, of course, what happens? They give us back the cues and the affectations that we want. So, of course, it's easy to love somebody who does that. But wait a minute, aren't ruined buildings and trees and stones and rocks and rivers and guitars and pianos and instruments also worth falling in love with? There are certain books, but we don't really have those in our mind as things we say we love them, but we can actually fall in love with them as well in the same way, that we do with human beings. And when you do that, you're a lot less lonely for a start. You're a lot less deceived for a second thing, and you're also more privy to the intelligence of the universe, because the intelligence of the universe expresses itself through these so-called inanimate objects,
right,
whereas it expresses itself only in a very confused and distorted and egoistic way through human beings. So it's another thing we need. It's an old Druidic thing of, that we need to get back to, is the idea of the power of inanimate things that come alive when we love them. And
absolutely.
fall in love with them.
Sure. Well, because we are feeding them our vibrational energy, and these supposedly inanimate objects are absorbing exactly who we are, and that's where psychometry is true. I mean, one of the things that I do in my classes is, and I don't teach all the time anymore, but periodically I do, Michael, and one of the things that we do is we do psychometry so that people can begin to see, number one, that inanimate objects maintain a vibrational rate of the individual that has had them, and number two, that we, all of us, have an ability of tuning into that and then finding out whatever you want to know about that individual that owns it or has held it.
That's right, and it's one of the most ancient of all sciences. It opens the door to many other clairvoyant abilities. It totally opens you up to using the pendulum and going further.
Sure.
Yes, it's very essential.
Very interesting.
And it's a great subject.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that, well, do you mind if I ask how old you are?
I'm about 38.
My gosh. 38, and know the things that you know. Michael, I tip my hat to you and honor you, because you are into some of the most important and some of the most interesting topics. Even, and maybe we can start off because of the Celtic information and the Druid information.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe some people out there don't understand what it is. Would you get into an explanation of where it started, where it comes from, and what it means?
Definitely. Well, what I discovered, and there's a few other authors who definitely know this, although their work is mostly suppressed, what we call the Druidic order, or the Celtic. First of all, I'm half Indian, right? My mother was from the northern Himalayas, and my dad was Irish. So right there, that put me on to the gig long ago, because you see, there are connections, and many scholars have always questioned, what are the connections between the races of the ancient world?
Right.
What is the connections of the high Aryans from the Himalayas and the so-called, Celtic or Iberian races? So even from a racial and migratory point of view, there's tremendous questions about the bloodline and the movement of the tribes.
Mm-hmm.
Then Ireland has something very noticeable about it. It is the last of the great islands on the eastern seaboard. So anybody that is moving across Europe, any tribe, that's about as far as they're going to get. So most historians have always been saying that Ireland was colonized from the east through these migrations. Then they find out that no, Ireland has been colonized from the west. All the major colonizations took place from the west. Now, we got a question then. All that's out there on the west is the Atlantic Ocean. So
that's right.
How did this happen? Mariners are not going to usually, spin their wheels and do that when it's so simple to just land on the southern coast or the eastern coast. What's all this colonization from the west? Well, there's no lands out there now,
right?
But there probably was before. So just one thing leads to the other, and then you find out that these high druids, there are in Irish mythology 4 waves of migrations. These migrations, and everybody has used different theories to account for it. 5,000 years prior to the time of the Christians, there was these ancient migrations, and the third, if you count the indigenous population that was there from the beginning, who were a demonic type of hybrid creature, if you include them, then it is about the 4th migration to Ireland, was of a very, very exalted and high group of priests and Druid priests. And they were also a matriarchy, so they had women who were also the queens,
right,
and who were also possessed of incredible magical power. Now this tribe were high druids, and they colonized Ireland, and they're responsible for Tara and for some of the great monuments that are there. And as I said, there's no doubt in my mind that and by the way, the Arthurian tradition is a sort of a re-scripting of this earlier Celtic myth that I'm talking about. For instance, the king of this high druidic order that I'm talking about that came to Ireland, he had a sword, and his sword was called Retaliator, and it would vibrate in the presence of evil. We find this sword concept appearing later on in later myths of the English line in Arthur and his sword.
That's right.
Yeah, so we have, and interestingly, the king's name, the king that of this tribe that came to Ireland, his name is Nuah, and it's spelled N-U-A-H, very similar to Noah. And what is the story of Nuah, the Irish king of Ireland, the High King of Ireland?
Yeah.
He comes to Ireland because he said that his people have come from 4 islands that sank beneath the waves in a great cataclysm, and they were guided to build ships to save the remnants of the human race, and they came to Ireland. Now, wait a minute. Where have we heard that story before?
Yeah.
See? So we have Noah, we have Nuah. It turns out that Nuah, the king, his sidekick, the next most important person in the Celtic tradition in that line, is called Lu, the sun god. Lu goes about and does many heroic deeds, and one of the deeds that he has to do is go and fight this enormous giant. Okay, Alex, he has to go out and fight this giant of the evil ones that are picking on his people.
Right.
And the weapon that he uses to go out and fight this enormous giant is a sling.
Oh my gosh.
So Lu, the sun god, the young man, goes out on horseback and takes with him a sling, which he then fights this great evil giant. You know, one after the other, one after the other, one after the other. And I'm only giving you a few. The whole idea of the changeling, where the elves are meant to come, you see, and take a child and replace that child with their own child.
Yep, right.
We have stories in the Celtic legends of powerful super weaponry, just like you have in the Mahabharata. We have stories of powerful magical abilities that we now can understand could happen, because in ancient times, this was, and up till the modern age, all of this has been just, ignored, because it can be put under the heading of fairy folklore, old wives' tales, nothing to worry about.
Sure.
But as a matter of fact, now that we have certain things, certain new technologies, we can revisit these ancient myths and find out that, wait a minute, something was going on here. What about this famous cauldron of life in the ancient Celts, in which dead heroes or dying heroes can be put into this cauldron and brought back alive?
Yeah.
Haven't we heard of cryogenic chambers?
My gosh, yeah.
Today, Nada, the king that I'm talking about, when he gets his arm cut off in a great fierce battle, what happens? The Daneshek, the physician of the tribe, comes and says, I will fashion for you, he says, my king, a silver arm, and it will be as good as an ordinary arm. And in fact, the ancient Celtic legend, you can read it for yourself, is the king goes around with this mechanical, what they refer to as a silver arm.
Jeez.
Wait a minute, haven't we heard about, cybernetics?
Of course.
You see? So now that we're in the 21st century, we can start looking back, and that's what my book does. Part of what my book does is to try and revisit these myths and take off the veneer of fairy folklore and start to read about these incredible things that were going on, because Zachariah Sitchin has focused a great deal on the Babylonian Sumerian record. He and so many other scholars in this field, Alex, have omitted or avoided or ignored one of the most powerful archives of ancient knowledge about ancient times that you could ever hope for, and that's the Celtic tradition. So, my job is to go, like he did with the Sumerian Babylon.
Right.
I've gone into the Celtic legends to bring forth what these forefathers of ours have to say about the times that they lived in, and the cataclysms, and the war of the gods, and the coming of evil into the world, and the war of light and darkness. And I believe, and my book is testimony of it, that the Celtic legend, the Celtic mythologies are among the best and most profound in the world, because they're the most untouched.
Yep. Michael, are there any written records like, the Sumerian texts, the tablets that Zachariah Sitchin and others have been studying for years? Are there anything similar to that in the Celtic tradition?
Yes, good question, and there are many of them. There's the Annals of the Four Masters, there's the Liber Gabala, there's, of course, the Book of Kells, there's the Book of Taliesin, which is considered Welsh, but it's also Celtic. And did you know, believe it or not, that they've a great scholar of the ancient of the 19th century called L.A. Waddell even proved that what we call the Norse Edda is actually British and came from the Celtic Irish.
I didn't know that.
Right. Jeez. So there is no end of it. And remember, we're talking about books that these books are not left around because they're sequestered and suppressed. But so to follow through on your question, yes, there are many thousands, but of course we don't have all of those accessible to us. We only have a few, because it's been the old Indiana Jones, watch this hand while you don't see what the other hand's doing trick of burying this information. But yes, there are, and in my book sources a lot of that and shows people where to go to find out a lot of this information. And again, the best book is Ireland itself. I call it a temple or a cathedral without walls. When you go there and look at it with evidence of your own eyes, even around the cities, and if you can, if people go on a holiday and they can, in fact, get out to some of these ancient sites, you know, they'll find that, for instance, Tara, and nearby Tara you have Newgrange, and Newgrange predates the pyramid. It's literally the oldest structure in the world. It's been studied by some of your fine scientists here, like Arthur C. Clarke, you know, and Ignatius Donnelly. It's a very famous place. And clearly you can see that the history books are completely fraudulent about these places.
Incredible. I mean, absolutely incredible.
But the one most important thing to bring out about the Celtic people is that they were strictly a matriarchal society. This is one of the reasons also why evidence of them and who they really were and what they've got themselves up to is already been hidden a lot more than it has been with other cultures. You see, they don't mind talking a lot about other cultures because there's a difference. The Celtic people were very much a matriarchy. They had women in very senior positions of not only government power, social power, but also mystical power. In the Celtic tradition, you can see that they were the initiators. Now, this gets already corrupted and bastardized even when we come up to the Arthurian tradition. Because, okay, yes, all right, they've granted us Guinevere.
Yep.
But, of course, Guinevere, like Eve, does the dirty. She falls, right?
That's it.
But every other female personage in the Arthurian tradition, especially Morgane Le Fay and the main people, are negative. So here we have a Celtic mythology taken from the Irish because Morgane Le Fay is actually a rescripting of Morgana, the Morrigu, who was the queen of one of the kings of the tribe I'm telling you about. So she appears in another dramatis personae, but in the same old way, it's been corrupted now. So a very short time has passed, and already the females are subservient, submissive, and even really are rivals, or they're emissaries of the dark side. So again, we have immediate corruption, and that's why they don't want any of us to look back to these ancient times to find out what kind of status the women had. And women in general need to wake up to this and realize that they are being punished. They've been punished for a certain crime that they committed 13,000 years ago to the original Atlantis.
Let me bring into the conversation another equation, and that is a very dear friend of mine, somebody who I refer to as a brother, is Russell Means, who you may or may not have heard of, but Russell is part of the Lakota Sioux Nation.
He's not familiar.
Oh yeah, if we had time, I could tell you a lot about Russell because he is very, very well known. But one of the things that Russell has been telling me about for a long time, and also our listeners, is the importance of a matriarchal society. Because when humanity lived under a matriarchal society, there were no wars, there were no fighting. I mean, it was totally different. Only under the patriarchal society do we get into the wars and the fighting and the jealousy and what have you.
Absolutely.
Now, so I guess, Michael, one of the questions I have is that why? Why has this suppression of women, and my gosh, I was raised a Catholic primarily, and you see Mary Magdalene. I always grew up thinking, well, she was a prostitute. My God, man, that's the furthest thing from the truth that you could ever imagine. And there's proof now that not only was she one of the leaders, the higher-ups of the Essenes, but there is enough evidence around that she was probably the wife of the man we refer to as Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that. The evidence is completely in. And even the term harlot was a very poor mistranslation of a Greek word called herodulai, which actually meant sacred or beloved one. I have a DVD on that very subject called Divination of the Goddess, which goes into the whole of the cult of the goddess. And talking elaborately about this. It's very hard to get into exactly why it happened, but it all took place on Atlantis. My book opens with a visitation. In my work, after reading through all these comparative myths, it turns out that our planet was visited around about 50,000 years ago by an alien species. Now, the planet, of course, has been visited by many, many different kinds of extraterrestrial beings. But this one group that the Bible and the ancient scriptures refer to as the fallen angels, they came from another solar system and invaded our planet and decided to intermingle and actually interrupt the destiny and the flow and the fate of our early forefathers. And they did this in two ways. They first tried mating with the women, and of course the evidence is in the Book of Enoch, the evidence is in the Bible. I mean, a person with a single brain cell can see that there's clear evidence of this. But however, that didn't work. In the Kebra Nagast, which is an old book from the Middle East, it actually tells you that it was more like Rosemary's Baby. There's actually a caption I have in my DVD and the book which says that unfortunately it didn't work, and that these women were killed by their offspring, and that the offspring were, coming out of their bellies, and all sorts of terrible things were happening. It basically was a total failure.
Wow.
So then these aliens that and they're humanoid, they then decided on a much more pernicious form of interaction, which involved a genetic hybridization.
Okay.
So, my book, Atlantis, Alien Visitation, Genetic Manipulation, shows that not only did we have super technologies, we had very powerful, scientifically advanced beings on our planet who did the unspeakable. They actually interfered with the most sovereign thing that we have, which is our own biology. They actually invaded, and they crossed their own DNA, alien DNA, with the DNA of our forefathers, so that each and every single human that lives today has got alien DNA and human DNA, and that is known, but they cover it up, and they slowly leak out information that we don't know all this junk DNA, what it is, and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But they know fine well what is going on here, and unfortunately, in my book I refer to the first creation of these aliens as Homo Atlantis, because this remarkable entity that had alien DNA and human DNA was created on what we call the place of Atlantis. And my book also clears up a lot of disinformation, because Atlantis was not in fact a continent. Atlantis was on a continent. The continent that it was on was Appalachia, and Appalachia was a continent that existed in the Atlantic Ocean. It's no longer there, but the scientists have seen the remains of it in the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
Right.
And Atlantis was a city-state, or a citadel on Appalachia, so there's just a certain amount of disinformation that needs to be cleared up. But on that citadel, very much in a sort of a Planet of the Apes type scenario, they crossed their own advanced alien DNA with us. And in my book, what I'm talking about, which very few other people have gone into, I had a talk with Graham Hancock one time about this, and he's starting to get fascinated now about the coming of evil into the world. And I gave him my book, and he was very interested in it, because what I have discovered is that what we call evil, and I know that's a philosophical, religious concept there, but that thing that in human beings, that strange proclivity for injustice, for crime, for abuse, for violence, you name it.
Right.
It's not just coming down to us through the erstwhile movement of nature, which has always been put before us in schools. I mean, that makes no sense at all, because how can it be that the universe, which is in perfect harmony from the greatest neutron star to the smallest subatomic particle, in perfect equilibrium, how could it, at the head of its species, make a blunder, right, a failure so bad that species would endanger nature's own order? Anyone who even believes that, I mean, what can you say? I mean, you're compounding ignorance on top of ignorance. And we do believe it. The human race actually believes that this thing is in perfect equilibrium everywhere, including the human body is in perfect balance, could make a blunder in the brain of its highest species. No, the fact of the matter is, it is not nature's way or nature's law that makes this evil. It is constant tinkering and tampering with nature's laws and ordinances. It's a violation of these orders that has caused this, and now we're lumbered with it.
Wow. Because
in fact, what happened was that the Atlanteans who came here did violate our sovereignty, and this causes the schism, the schizoid nature of the human being.
Michael, is this the same genetic manipulation that Tsarion talks about with the Anunnaki coming down?
The same thing. Anunnaki is the Sumerian word. It comes from a word called Anunnaki, which meant the heavenly serpents.
Okay, serpents.
And the Celtic people and the other legends of the world are talking about exactly the same thing. So call them the heavenly serpents, the serpent people, the serpent race, like William Bramley does, the Brotherhood of the Snake, the Anunnaki, the Anunnaki, the fallen angels, the Nephilim. Yes, we were visited about 50,000 years ago by a race of incredibly advanced people, but these individuals lacked what spiritual people call the violet ray. They did not have the spiritual component, because they had turned it off in their own destiny. That's a whole other story, but they had turned it off in their own particular destiny. And anyway, just the fact that they had emigrated to our planet, why should they care for us? I mean, I can understand it in one way. They had no sense of, love for us. They had completely no allegiance to us, and they wanted, very much in the way that John Milton, his Lucifer character in Paradise Lost, wanted servants and slaves. That's what they wanted. They needed it. So the idea was to create the perfect servant, and they succeeded. And we are still under this particular psychic dictatorship today. I mean, do you mind taking a second and I can read you a passage from the Mayan book, The Popol Vuh?
No, please do. Yes.
It's a very short caption, and I want your listeners to listen to this because it's absolutely incredible for two reasons. It's going to tell you something that'll blow your socks off, but two, it also explains why books like the Mexican codices and the Celtic books have been suppressed. I'll just read a few lines and everyone will know why it is that these books were committed to the flames and put into secret private libraries. This is from the Popol Vuh, and the quote goes, and this is the God speaking, "Let us make him who shall nourish and sustain us. What shall we do to be invoked, to be remembered in earth? We have tried with our first creatures, but we could not make them venerate us. So then let us try to make obedient, respectful beings who shall nourish and sustain us." So, and this is only in one book. Jack Barringer, who's a great writer, who wrote a book called Past Shock, because he also was talking about the fact that this particular invasion into our DNA caused enormous psychological trauma, which we're still outliving today. Well, he, in his book, claims that there's 30,000 texts still in existence that talk about this visitation. So think, Alex, what might have been if most of them hadn't been burned. We have 30,000 that exist. Think how many there must have been before any type of purging.
Oh, it had to be just incredible. I mean, where are these 38,000 texts now?
Oh, all over. Every culture. He's talking about different cultures, Mahabharata, African legends, all the legends that exist in writing, the Terra Papers of the Navajo Indians, for instance. There are many books out there, the Edda, many of the Egyptian papyri, the Bible, the apocryphal books. There's so much out there and more. It's unbelievable. I try to reference as many as I can in my book to save people the 30 years, of studying this stuff. But that's just one little caption about the fact that the human beings were made in order to be the perfect servant in the garden. Now, the most fascinating part of this is what I'm going to tell you now is that this being that they created, Homo Atlantis, basically is our forefather. Something went wrong. Because Homo Atlantis did have high intelligence. I mean, he basically had the intelligence of his alien masters, right? His alien creators. He had their intelligence, but he also had something they didn't have. Because he had he had DNA of the Earth humans. He had the spiritual side. He had the side that was close to the animals, close to the universal order, and that was very much what you might say threatening to his leaders. Because they didn't have it. They were purely alien. So what happened after many thousands of years, I mean, this didn't take place overnight, but after many thousands of years, these Homo Atlanteans decide, hey, wait a minute, we're intelligent, we're a very evolved race. In fact, in many ways, we're even higher than these, people who keep on giving us the orders. We don't want to serve them. So to cut a long story short, the Homo Atlanteans leave Atlantis, and they set up their own thriving civilization on the continent known as Lemuria. It used to be called Oceania.
Right. Yeah.
So in the ancient times, two rival factions, and you'll always hear about these two rival factions in ancient mythologies, were created. What we're calling the Lemurians and what we're calling the Atlanteans. Now, as you know, there's a lot of disinformation out there. A lot of people are connecting Atlantis with the high culture. Now, this is a serious breach. This is a serious piece of mind control and programming, because that is not the case. When Atlantis is put before us as this high culture of thriving arts and the great high ones and all of the rest of it, we are doing a massive disservice to our ancient forefathers, because in fact that's not the case. Atlantis was a very high culture scientifically, yes, but it was morally debauched. It was a place of great evil. And Lemuria, the continent of Mu, and by the way, the word Mu comes from the Hindi word Muhadevi, which means Muhadevi is the land of the mother. So Mu is named after the universal Shakti, the motherland of the motherland of humanity. And this is the place where the great cultural civilizations came from. And the people that were on there slowly tried to condition out of themselves the alien part. You couldn't get rid of it ever, but you could have a civilization that would slowly, condition it out of us. And also maybe even the Lemurians, the Homo Atlantis, had the ability to even tweak the DNA so that those evil traits would be much less.
Wow. I always thought, Michael, that Lemuria was older than Atlantis.
No, this is right, because remember, we have a lot of disinformation merchants out there.
Okay.
And unfortunately, the reason why they make hay and why we often accept a lot of what they're saying is because we are, on the other hand, you see, being information starved. So what happens when you are doing this good cop, bad cop type of situation in which you take away all sacred knowledge, you sequester it, you divide people from their racial roots, you lie through the thousands of years, and you completely existentially estrange people from their center.
Okay.
And then you send out your henchmen to write some books and to create a lot of beautiful theories with 70% truth and 30% lie. And of course, I don't blame the human race for accepting it. Hell, we're starved for mystery because we have come from that ancient tradition, and there's a part of us that is perpetually longing for answers. But you see, we have to watch who is leading us to water.
True. Yeah.
So
Very
yes,
true.
there was ancient civilizations in the past. Yes, there was high cultures. But see, now we are in a very good place in the 21st century to look back and get the facts. I am all about facts. I am about going to the source. The thing that distinguishes my work from other people is that I go to the horse's mouth. I go to the sources of all these ancients and to the brotherhoods and to the secret societies and to these elites in order to present to people not my point of view, but what is there, so that they can see it with their own eyes and make their own decisions.
Amazing, because that's so rare a quality today, Michael, and the thirst for the truth. And like you said, most people, they're going to take the easiest way, the most expedient way to get a book out to make some money and throw a little bit of truth. But let me go back. You said about these beings that came down, reptilian. Are they, I mean, as we understand it, are they truly reptilian races?
No. This is another massive piece of disinformation that's been put out there, and I think some of it's benign, some of it's just misreading of the ancient legends. These entities that came down here from another solar system were not reptilian. You could have walked past these people in the street. They actually were probably a little taller, certainly much stronger, and certainly lived for many hundreds of years. But to all intents and purposes, they looked humanoid. The thing that we're calling the reptilians did exist, but they were created much later than the Homo Atlantean being I'm talking about. See, what happened basically in the timeline, for people who haven't read the book, Homo Atlantis was created, but he leaves the Garden of Eden and goes to form Lemuria and sets up his own thriving civilization there. Well, what do the masters do? These warlocks on Atlantis, they're missing some servants. You know what I mean? Nobody to bring them hot coffee in the morning, nobody to change the channels. Hey, that's not good.
Okay.
You know, where's our food?
Yeah, right.
So what these guys do is they go back to the drawing board to create a Mark II version. And that being is referred to as Adamic man, meaning Adams and Eves.
Yes.
These are the individuals, but you see, the warlocks of Atlantis were very intelligent. They knew, wait a minute, let's make sure we don't have the same problem repeated that we had with our first servants. So what we'll do is we'll block the centers of intelligence of the new creation. We'll dumb him down, basically. Now, you know that you can go into a laboratory today, sit in a chair for half an hour, doctor sticks a few probes in your brain, and you're at the level of a vegetable. It can be done today in half an hour. Think what you can do if you have power over the genome. So these individuals were able to shut down this Adamic race, and they made the perfect servant. And they sent them out into the garden. And the Bible, when you hear in the Bible that they were sent, Adam and Eve were sent into the garden naked, you have to understand that that does not mean physically naked. It means intellectually naked.
Okay.
This is what, and also we have to realize that it wasn't just two people, Adam and Eve, it was a race of people that were there to serve the masters. This will clear up a lot of things. That when you're hearing about the Jehovah and the Elohim, when you're hearing about the Adam and the Eve, think in terms of plural, not singular. This will help to understand the Bible. Now, getting to your reptilian theme, after the Adams failed to serve the masters, many thousands of years later, they went back to the drawing boards for the third time and created what we now know today to be the reptilian race. where there were no human DNA involved at all. It was purely alien DNA and reptilian or animal DNA.
Huh.
But that's a different story. I have this whole thing sketched out in the book, but the reptilians are Earth-born. You can deny it's a total disinformation about people telling you that they came from outer space. Well, they were formed by people from outer space.
Right.
They were created by people from other planets, but they themselves are purely the creation of the Earth.
Michael, the works that you're talking about with the Druids, Celtic, and that background, how closely does it follow with the Vedic writings out of India?
Actually, that's a really good question as well. And some people would say that they are almost identical. And one of the people who would have said that, and the man who actually proved it, was this 19th century scholar I was telling you about called L.A. Waddell.
Okay. I
refer to him in my book, and he can be searched on my website. If people go to the links page or contact me, I can give you all his information. I was one of the contributors to the books of David Icke. You know the researcher David Icke?
Oh, yeah.
Well, David Icke uses L.A. Waddell a lot in his books, and it was me that actually put him on to L.A. Waddell.
Good.
I've been researching L.A. Waddell from the 70s. Now, L.A. Waddell was the man, this great scholar, who was in the British Army in the 19th century with Queen Victoria, and he had gone out there, but he was a genius of the first degree. He spoke all the Oriental languages, and he discovered that the king lists and the dramatis personae of the gods and the heroes of the Vedic Indians, because he was reading them in the pure Sanskrit. He discovered that these are identical in etymology and philology to the old legends of the Norse Edda, the Teutonic people, and the Celtic people. So to answer your question, they're pretty much identical if you do your homework and you know what you're looking for.
So they're saying and giving the same historical stories.
In fact, so much so that L.A. Waddell showed that if you take the word Veda and the word Edda, they're actually the same word. They both mean holy books or holy writings, but the V sound, they didn't have that in Anglo-Saxon, so the Edda, which is sacred knowledge, and the Veda, or the Veda, are the same word.
My gosh.
By the way.
Yeah.
So, and he goes way beyond that, explaining incredible things that would blow your socks off. He talks about Kent in southern England. Everybody knows the county of Kent, and you even have places in America called that. K-E-N or K-E-M or K-H-E-N, or the man's name, Kenneth, is the old word for Egypt. Egypt wasn't called Egypt by the Egyptians. It was called Kem or Ken. So when you have a man called Ken, it's actually Kenneth means man of Egypt. And the southern county in England called Kent was the place of the Egyptians. So common it was that the Egyptians, frequented there. And in Ireland context, there's one of the most beautiful ancient sites is in Armagh, County Armagh, which is the burial site of one of the great Gaelic queens. Okay, her name was Maeve, and Maeve's tomb is in Armagh, and they found mummified baboons there.
Wow.
Mummified baboons, exactly the same as you get in Egypt. And did you know that when one of the Celtic kings in one of these migrations I've been telling you about, one of the kings that came from Europe was called Mile, M-I-L-E, and his wife was called Scotia, S-C-O-T-A. She was a pharaoh's daughter, and that is where Scotland gets its name, from Scotia, the daughter, the queen, the consort of Mile, King Mile of the Celts, but she was a pharaoh's daughter. So the Scots, a lot of them know this, of course, who've done their homework, know that they're named after an Egyptian princess. So we're into some heavy stuff here,
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Do you happen to know Prince Michael of Albany?
Yes, I've read his book, the book that he wrote on the Scottish lineage.
Yeah.
The heritage of the Scots. It's one of the books I recommend. It's incredible.
Well, then because I know you know Lawrence Gardner.
Certainly, yeah. I think I did a few talks, and I think he was at some of those talks. I certainly love his books. Yeah. He along with Mustafa Gadala, and along with William Bramley, they've really got some great information.
Well, Prince Michael is the end of the line at this point of the royal bloodline.
So I hear.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. There's a lot of things happening in our world today that are coming to the end, not just bloodlines. Do
you think, Michael, that we are coming to the end of an age, and are we coming to the end of life as we know it on Earth? What is going to happen? And let's go back, because we talked about the Mayan, the phrase that you read, but the Mayan calendar.
Right.
How do you interpret that?
Well, I have a DVD coming out called 2012, Where History Ends.
Okay.
And in that thing, it's 13 hours long, by the way. This was a DVD set, because this subject is so incredibly mysterious and brilliant.
Yeah.
The Mayans were incredible people. Now, I do believe, to keep it short, that obviously it's not going to be the end of the world, but it'll be the end of the world as we know it.
Okay.
It's pretty much what the Mayans are talking about. It's not so much the end of the world as the end of one kind of civilization, one kind of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I prefer to look at it in Jungian terms. We're on a countdown to extinction from one point of view, and you only have to look out the window or read the paper to see that mankind is up to something really bizarre. Now, this last phase of the last 13-year countdown in the Mayan cycle was called the Age of Revealing, the Age of Awakening, in which the masks of the false would start to come down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're seeing all around us. And I don't mean just Martha Stewart, Michael Jackson, and some NFL player where everyone's looking under the rug and finding out what dirt they're up to, with Bill Cosby, the latest. That's just small potatoes. Just wait till 2007, and you're going to see some real revelations. Because
don't pass over that. Now, wait a minute. You better explain that a little bit.
Well, the Mayans talking about the Age of Revealing is very much the same thing in the Bible as the Apocalypse.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
The Apocalypse is just a simple Latin word that meant the removal of a covering. Apocalypse just means a leather covering or a lid. So the Apocalypse is nothing more than the removing of the lid.
Okay.
What does this mean? It's Jungian. It's purely psychological. So we need to make sure that we're not always looking outside for earth changes and freaks of nature. Again, we would love to do that. The ego wants to blame God, freak of nature, act of God, so that we get always off the hook. But see, that's not what the Mayans were talking about. In this last age of revealing, even though earth may respond to man's violence, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how many people realize that even the tsunami could be created also psychically? But let's not get into that. The idea that the Mayans were talking about is that the age of revealing is when the dark side of man starts to come forth to be cleaned. But in doing that, the light will shine brighter. So whether it's photonic light because we're passing through the photonic belt, or whether it's other astrological alignments, it really doesn't matter. The external trigger is not that important. It's fascinating, but it's not that important. What's important is the end result. Man has now to face his dark side. That's what this whole saber-rattling thing is about on the collective level right here in America, where the whole country is sinking back into mayhem, which, it should be far, far away from that. And here we are again sinking into this primitivism through these monstrous leaders that we have. Because who are they? These are just people that represent the collective unconscious.
Sure.
Well, this repressed content is going to come forth in order to be recognized, in order to be acknowledged, in order to be healed.
When it happens, is it going to be all at one time?
No.
It's going to be over a period of X number of years. How many?
Right. It's already happened. You see, the last of the countdown the Mayans had sections of, for people who don't know, who are listening, the Mayans always had ages of 13-year cycles.
Okay.
And the 13-year cycle that counts down to 2012 obviously started in 96, right?
Right.
Because from 1996 until 2012, it's 13 years. So I have been able to see these changes, and clairvoyants agree with me that these changes have already been taking place. If you read Barbara Han Clowes, The Palladian Agenda, she's talking about 1980 that it started. Other people are talking about 2000. It really doesn't matter. It's a phase. And certainly since we crossed the harmonic convergence, and then we passed 1996, it has started since then. Then don't forget that November 8th, 2003 was the exact midway point between the 13-year period.
Okay.
So we're actually 1 year already past the halfway point. So, by the way, just wait till 2007, and you and I will not have to be telling anybody about this. They're going to be telling us. It's going to be so obvious, so in the streets. It already is to me. I've seen it for years. But, that's because I have the benefit of coming from, clairvoyant backgrounds. And I've worked on these types of perception. But even ordinary middle American person who's got no background in this is going to be telling us, wait a minute, what the hell is going on? Something very strange is going on. Because, pharmaceutical medication is already skyrocketing. Addiction is already peaking. The child delinquency, the delinquency of the young, is already skyrocketing through the roof, you know? Something is happening in the psyche of man. So when you hear about the remote viewers and the mind people, interpreters talking about the time is speeding up, it's not so much that time is speeding up, but consciousness is slowing down. So it appears that time externally is speeding up. And as Wilhelm Reich, the great scientist, proved, that which happens within consciousness will affect the Earth grid. But it's not that the Earth grid is affecting us. No, no, no. Consciousness has much greater power over material life.
Yeah.
So when we start, if we ever do, and we probably might see Earth disturbances or changes in the climate and changes in the weather, let it be completely understood that it is consciousness that's changing this first. You know, and then by way of the Earth grid, by way of the dragon lines, by way of the Schumann waves and the Hartmann waves, and the Curry lines, and the understanding of this, which is familiar to Feng Shui people and people into Vastu and Feng Shui and Geomancy, they'll know what I'm talking about. Then Earth starts to react. You know, if people get out H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, the original, H.G. Wells makes that very clear. He says that Earth responded with violence of her own to man's violence. So all the elites know this.
Now,
even though it might be presented to us the other way around for our security, you know, our comfort, our delusion.
Then, Michael, what are some of the drastic changes that we will see in 2007 that you're aware of?
There's going to be all sorts of things, and many people have predicted it. I'm not too much about the details of it. What I am about is empowerment and solutions. The most important thing is that people who have already a very strong sense of psychic hygiene, that means people who do work on themselves, people who haven't cut corners in their spiritual life, people who have not walked on other individuals in order to get where they are, people who have not lived sinful and disgusting lives of debauchery and deception, you see, and outright, narcissism. Those people have nothing in the wide world to worry about. I want to make that clear because there's no reason for fear. There's absolutely no reason for anything. All that is happening is that the roach cleaner is on his way. All that's happening is that the car is going through the spin, through the car wash.
Yeah, right. It's good to clean house.
Everything in our life, Alex, we wash.
Yeah, the big vacuum is coming along.
Right. Mother Nature is getting busy. She's already been calling our names. Those who don't hear, don't worry. If they have to fall off the trees like rotten apples, be okay with that because this is about nature. We clean everything in our lives, everything. We clean our beds. We wouldn't even dream. We clean our bodies. We wouldn't dream of eating off the same plates twice without washing them first. You know, how come we do not clean the emotions? How we do not clean the psyche? Well, Western man has lost the rituals of doing that. We've murdered all the shamans. We've murdered all the teachers. We've murdered all the Gnostics. We've burned all the witches, the Wicca. We've killed everybody who used to have the secrets of being able to clean the psyche. Well, now we're going to pay the price of that because we do not know. Granted, you've had the Freuds and the Jung, and you've had, Wilhelm Reich, and you have had the psychotherapeutic movement, but that's also become somewhat corrupted.
That's right.
And they're not dealing, you have to do it on your own expense then, don't you? You have to go at high expense to these individuals to even get into the starting line of how to do it. Whereas before, the community used to do it. There used to be rites and rituals to help us go through this, not be the repressed, narcissistic, pent-up, completely rabid people that we are, and the only way that we can then process our dark side is by going and creating the hideous murders and following warmongers who say, oh, I know how to help you, exercise all this pain. We'll have another world war. We'll have more murder. We'll have a police state. We'll have a new world order. Well, these are the ways that we are processing our darkness. But there's another way of doing it.
Do you think, Michael, that there's going to be one single event that's going to trigger the massive changes? And I'm thinking about, the polar shift that Edgar Casey talked about. Science knows that we've had over 200 polar shifts in the last several million years. So it's not a unique experience. It's just going to be unique for all of us who are around today.
In fact, you're right. The last pole shift we had, it was 13,500 years ago. I cover that in the book because the last pole shift that we have was actually precipitated by the aliens that I'm talking about when a great war took place on our planet using nuclear weapons. And what my work differs from a lot of other scholars because the last pole shift that we have actually was precipitated by human action. But to answer your question, I don't know. I'm still looking at that. This is so new and so fresh. I'm open to all sorts of possibilities. There could be a variety of different things. I think what will happen is that it'll be cultural. I think that each individual culture, based on their own level of collective toxicity, their own level of denial, it'll manifest individually. For some, it could be plagues and diseases, right? And if the New World Order guys have their way, it very much could be. In other areas, it might be a breakdown of sanity in another kind of a way, you know? For other people, it could be other... It's going to be new. The ancient legends talk about that we will not know. It'll be so unusual. It'll be very, very different. And I'm not ruling out climate. I'm not ruling out weather. I'm not ruling out those things. I just don't want to make those the focal point. That here we are, innocent as doves, sitting and just, you know, being affected by outward forces. This is the way that the ego has got off the hook before with its karma. We have to understand how very much responsible we are in our own daily life, you know, and take care of that and get back to a Gnostic tradition where we can use the divination arts and use the rites and rituals so that we are constantly also cleaning our consciousness. Because it is not experiences that always should be new and fresh. It is the mind of the experiencer which needs to be new and fresh every day. That's something we forget.
Well, like you just said, Michael, also is you named several different areas that it could happen, and yet it's happening in all of them. Whether it's
happening in all of them. It's a fractal. It's a hologram. It's all based on consciousness. The thing is purely generated by consciousness, and it can't really be predicted. You know, I'm an astrologer, and I have sat down with individuals, and I can see where it is in their own individual life, and that's what we need to do. We need to worry about the self. You need to use the divination arts, and you need to use your clairvoyance and your psychic ability, and you need to use the mirror of the divination arts to look into those things and say, okay, where is my areas of, you know, toxicity and lack of psychic hygiene? Because once you take care of that and you find your center, nothing in the wide world can move you. I don't care what kind of chaos happens in the world, you will rise above it and not be touched. But the person who is narcissistic, hedonistic, selfish, and ruthless, and cold, and violent, their time is coming. And I have no problem with that. I cannot wait, in fact, because it is time. Nature has been calling us. Nobody's been paying any attention.
I agree.
And now the great wind will come to shake the tree, and that's perfectly all right by me. I come from the Celtic tradition, and you know something? I've watched too many great men fall to worry about the scum of the earth and what destiny might be waiting for them. I am still crying over the great souls who have fallen, trying to teach us the truth, and to worry about the rabble.
Michael, we talked about Atlantis and Lemuria. Am I correct in remembering Atlantis is probably in the Atlantic Ocean, Lemuria was in the Pacific Ocean?
Yes, you're right. That's exactly right. The Oceania was very close to where Australia and Hawaii is. It's a massive continent. That's why the Lemurians chose it. And it was far enough away from Atlantis, probably part of the Americas. I mean, we're talking about in fact, the scientists Allen and Dallaire from Oxford and Cambridge University have a book that is absolutely pivotal. It's called When the Earth Nearly Died. And they talk about that there was 5 ancient continents of the ancient world, not just 2 or 1. There was actually 5 continents that sank beneath the ocean. The science is in now to prove that.
5 that sank?
Yeah, 5. Wow. And those are only the mega ones. I talk about this in my book that there was even no oceans. All the oceans of the earth, except one, which is the small Mediterranean, are actually artificial. They were not even here more than 13,500 years ago.
Wow.
We have some learning to do about our history, and we have to learn why it is that these completely unsustainable ice ages were inserted by the Royal Academy and the Geological Society because they didn't want us to look back. So they totally stuck unsustainable, fictitious, Pleistocene epochs and ice ages between us and our ancient civilizations because they had so much to lose. Because my book shows that the Atlanteans, their progeny still ruled the world. We have a bloodline situation happening here. That after the great pole shifts, these Atlanteans set up their headquarters again in Asia Minor at the new equator, because after you have a pole shift, of course, the equator changes. And these guys, having a certain amount of technological knowledge, knew that they better head for the new equator because it's the only place that will sustain life all the year round. So they basically regrouped at the place that we now know today to be Babylon, Sumeria, the Middle East, Iraq, and Iran. So there's a reason why we're coming full circle today, and the vanguard of the West is over in Iraq. There's very important reasons for that. I go into that in my work and also my DVDs. It's a very interesting story to be told about what we're really over in Iraq for. But the idea, going back in time, was that after the pole shift, that was the only area that could sustain life. So when we're talking about the post-historical epochs, the rising of the great historical empires, which all school kids learn about, What we're not told is that those empires are based on the old demonic Luciferian Atlantean pattern. Now the Lemurians, the Lemurians who remained after the pole shift, they decided to do something different. Instead of converging, right? They decided to disperse to the four corners of the earth. They did this for security reasons, for safety, because there was so few of them left that they realized that if they ever stick together, they'll probably be wiped out completely in the future ages. So what they did was that they took their knowledge, they split up into contingents, and they moved to the different parts of the earth. And that is why today we find so many of the same cultures, the same dances, the same rituals, the same letters, the same numbers, the same spirituality all over the world. It's because one group took it there. The Lemurians moved to the corners of the world and married in with anybody that they met there, where the Atlanteans congressed, and they moved and started opening up the great dynasties and bloodthirsty empires that we associate with, you know, the Middle East, Sumeria, Babylon, and all other historical epochs basically are based on that pattern of agriculture, suppression of women, conquest and territorialism, and, you know, what have you.
Did they suppress women, Michael, because they were afraid of them and their power?
The story of women, which I go into the book, is absolutely incredible, and I'm amazed that this story has not been told, not even by women. It's amazing to me that I'm one of the first people to come across this story, even though it's there. My work rests on the work of a great writer called Leonard Schlein, who wrote Alphabet versus the Goddess. So certain other scholars have gone into aspects of this, but they're lacking the whole picture. Here's what happened. It's the most remarkable story. Remember I was talking about how the Adams and Eves went into the garden and they were dumbed down?
Right.
Well, what has happened, Alex, was that on Lemuria, the Lemurians, who were completely enlightened beings, turned on genetically and totally aware spiritually, they, of course, had been monitoring what their Atlantean forefathers might do, because they thought, you know, if we leave, it's pretty much likely that these guys might go back to the drawing boards. Let's just keep an eye and spy on them. So when it was discovered that the Atlanteans had, in fact, gone back to the drawing boards, had created another slave race, the Lemurians had a predicament, because they now realized that the beings, those Adams and Eves that were just, you know, walking around the garden completely dumbed down, were in fact genetic cousins to them.
Wow.
So they had now a very important moral predicament. It's the same way we would. Well, how would you be if you escaped from a concentration camp, but you knew that your brothers and your sisters were still caught in there?
Sure.
You couldn't just go about your business, you know, as you would. So what happened, in fact, was that the Lemurians decided to surreptitiously go into the garden. That means go back to Atlantis or to any of these outlying areas and try to open dialogue with these dumbed-down Adams, the Adamic race. And this succeeded. And in the Bible, that is referred to as the serpent entering the garden. Now, it's the reverse story that we have been told. Because, again, the Christians wanted to depress the symbolism of the female, so they turned the story I'm going to tell you now on its head and made the Eve the evil one. But the true story was that the sons of the serpent, because that's another name for the Lemurians, they sent their ambassadors, their representatives, into the Garden of Eden to open dialogue with the Adams and the Eves. And the old legends say that the Adams could not get it. The Adams just could not relate. But the Eves could. And it was the Eves, that's the female branch, they were attracted by these mysterious, enlightened, you know, illumined beings. They found them intriguing, and something about their energy made sense. So it was the female Eves that were the ones who decided to accompany the Lemurians back to their own continent and to be awakened, to be initiated into all that was hidden from them. Now, when I talk, you know, in front of audiences all over the world on this subject, invariably women come over to me at the end and go, Michael, why is it that the Eves bothered taking the dumbass Adams with them? Why didn't they just bugger off and go off with the Lemurians and leave those idiots?
So they took the Adams with them.
Yep, and I tell you, I can see many women crying on the front of the stage over that one after I'm done, and I go, well, look, love, I have no answer for you. You know, I have no answer to that one. You know, I'm glad you did, because I probably wouldn't be here, but you know, there you are. You had to drag those guys along. So what happened was that they basically were the ones responsible for Exodus, for the first true Exodus, which was getting the majority. And I'm not saying all of them left, but I'm saying that a great contingent surreptitiously went with the Lemurians, and there's evidence to even say that they went by spacecraft, because this is prior to the pole shift and the machinery worked. So that is coming to the answer to your question. when the Atlanteans discovered that this was the third time that they had now been snubbed, meaning the first time they'd been thrown out of their own planet, the two, they'd created a perfect servant who wouldn't serve them, and three, when they make that perfect servant, he gets seduced away, they are in a really angry, state.
Yeah.
So what has happened was that they have never forgiven the female. Because what happened was when the female did get to Lemuria, when the Eves came to Lemuria, they were also highly acknowledged, more than the Adams, because it was never forgotten by the sons of the serpent that the females were the ones who took to them originally. So the Eves were on Lemuria priestesses from point go, and that is where the original Wicca tradition of the initiating female, the wise woman, comes from. These things have a date of birth. They don't just appear out of the blue. The age of the initiator, the female shaman, the female initiator, the Guinevere, the Morgana Le Fay, that comes from a particular place and a particular time. The females were the first ones to be turned on to the knowledge of science and genetics as well, by the way, because the old euphemism that was used for thousands and thousands of years in mythology to represent genetics was called the tree of life, the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or the fruit of the tree of life. The tree of life is the perennial symbol for the knowledge of genetics. So when the God, that's Yahweh, Jehovah, the Atlanteans, said, you shall not eat off the tree of life, they were dumbing them down. They were preventing them from having the knowledge, the scientific knowledge that they had. The Lemurians said to the Adams and Eves, if you come with us, we'll turn you on to all of that. That's your legacy. You should know about it. So, in fact, when the Eves went to Lemuria and they were turned on by they were spiritually and genetically awakened, one of the things that they were awakened into was science, which included the knowledge of the herbs, the knowledge of the flora and the fauna, and many other things besides. But most importantly, they were considered the elite citizens in Lemuria, even as over the males. Now, of course, the reverse is true. In Atlantis, the hate was more for the females then, right, than it was for the males.
Yeah.
So under the Dominican order and through so many other risings, and by the way, the witch hunts, that's like a very small potatoes rising against female kind. If women only knew what has really been happening to their sex for many, many, many thousands of years, it would make the witch hunts look like pathetic, non-issue. So women have to wake up and realize what has been going on, what kind of legacy that they have lost, and we have to wake up and discover why it is in the back of every mind. We do, in fact, have a memory of a place that is paradisical and peaceful and beautiful. Well, that's not just some wish fulfillment, some Freudian wish fulfillment. That is, in fact, a race memory of a time when we were in a high culture and we have equanimity and we did have a tremendous connection with the flora and the fauna. But the Atlanteans have never forgotten it. So even after the pole shift and the rising of the new empires, the hatred, and it says in the Bible, you shall crawl upon your belly for this, because thou hast done this, you will be considered low. The Christians always make you think, the priests and the clerics always want you to make you hear that God is talking to the serpent. No, he's not. That passage is not God talking to the serpent, that upon thy belly you will go and you will eat of the dust of the earth. In fact, that passage, God is talking to the females, to the Eves.
Wow.
So what we have to understand here, that there's been the women, in the eyes of the Atlanteans and their progeny, women are guilty of a very serious crime. And they're never going to be forgiven for it, and they never have been.
But the crime really is just opening up to knowledge and learning truth.
And you know something? They're deadly afraid that today women might find that out. Why do you think it is that they have never allowed women to hold real office? Why do you think it is that they've never allowed, in any of the three religions of the world, they've never allowed women to be able to inner sanctum, to really go into the libraries, to really read the books, to really be initiated? They don't mind dressing themselves in female robes and sitting in Holy Mother Church and using female symbolism on you to mind control you. They don't mind doing that. And using the cup and the grail, you see, and all the female symbolism, that they'll certainly do. But they'll never let a real female take on that role. Why? Because women once had that role. And they have so much to lose should women matriculate and find out what has been hidden from them. My work is partly to bring to the world a lot of what has been hidden from us, and I believe that the time is right. In the tarot, we have the 21 cards, the 22 cycle, and we're in the 21st century now. We're in the age of solutions. We're in the age of knowledge. The 20th century was the age of problems, so that the human race could find out what problems face us, politically, sociologically, militaristically, and even psychologically. But we're in the 21st century now, which is a time for solutions to those problems. And those solutions are extremely grassroots. You don't have to be a PhD, and you don't have to be, some brain box belonging to some rich government-funded think tank. It's the simplest grassroots approach that is going to solve these mega problems that we've been facing for many thousands of years now.
Wow. That's all I can say, Michael. Do you feel, Michael, that before I go any further, I want people to know how to get your book. This is truly one of the most important books, I think, that just like we're talking about now, it is the bringing together of all of the different topics that we are talking about. The title, everybody, is Atlantis, Alien Visitation, and Genetic Manipulation by Michael Tsarion. Michael, how and where can people get this book?
Okay, that's a good question, but they can only get it from me right now, and there's a reason for that. The book is kind of new, and I didn't want to go the normal route because I wanted to keep the integrity of this information. As you can obviously know from what we're talking about, this is highly controversial material. So I didn't want to have it compromised by anybody telling me to sign on dotted lines and they're going to do deals for me and all of this stuff.
Yeah, right.
So I published it, wrote it, produced it, printed it, everything. So it's available from me, from my website. We have a Atlantis page. And if people want to use credit card, they can go to my website. And the website is Taroscopes. It's all one word. Taroscopes. Taroscopes. It's all one word.
Okay.
Like horoscopes and tarot together.
Yep.
And it's plural with one T. Taroscopes. Go to the Atlantis page and you can use your credit card. Or you could just, do it the old-fashioned way, send in the mail a request. And you can get all that information by calling me at 206-527-2968. That's 206 Seattle 527-2968. And for those people who have got computers and they don't want to get the hardback, we also have the book as an e-book, so they can carry it around on their computers. And you can get that either by going to the same Atlantis page, or we have a separate website called atlantisbook.com.
Okay.
So if you go to either of those websites, you can do the same thing. You can either order the hardback, not the hardback, but the hard copy.
Yeah, the hard copy, right.
Yeah, or you can get the e-book, and there's a difference. E-book is an electronic version of the same book. So either my website, taroscopes.com, go to the Atlantis page, or go to atlantisbook.com. You can do all the same stuff there. Or you can call me at 206-527-2968. Yeah. And also on the Atlantis page, there is a address for people who want to, do it by mail. Mm-hmm. That's also featured on the website, so they don't have to call. All the information is on the website, but if you want to call, we'll give you all the instructions as well.
Well, I'll make sure that we have a link on our page also, Michael. And
I appreciate that because you know something. It's really been people like yourself that have given me the support. Because remember, I studied this from young. I had no idea in the wide world that anybody would be remotely interested in this. Because remember, in Ireland, as I told you, they're not interested in this.
Right. Right.
So I had the biggest shock of my life when Victoria Jack and other people involved in the community, Dr. Roger Lear, Jordan Maxwell, Richard Hoagland, you name it. All of these people are like totally supportive of me and saying this is the most incredible stuff we've ever heard.
Good.
Where did it's basically the support of the American paranormal community of MUFON and lots of other academies within that subject. It's just been wonderful that way to get all of their support, and to also hear what they have to say. I mean, we've got anomalies like Lloyd Pye and his Star Child skull. We got the crystal skull. We got things that need explanation, and I explain all of those disconnects in the book. So there's a lot of stuff I connect and explain for people that have been out there, and there's been really no answer to it.
Yeah. I want to read a quote from Jordan Maxwell. Jordan is a good friend of our show. He's been on a lot.
Brilliant.
Oh, yeah. And he says, compulsory reading for those with a passionate desire to know the true origins of conflict on the planet and in the psyche. And if anybody should know, Jordan Maxwell should know. But
absolutely, he's my closest mentor. We're working on several projects together.
Oh, that's neat.
And he's been a major inspiration. I couldn't have written it. The book is partly dedicated to him.
Yeah.
Because obviously, without men like that in my life, I'd have been still stumbling around in the dark.
That's marvelous. I mean, it really is.
In 2004, in May, at Conspiracy Con in the Bay Area. we give him his Lifetime Achievement Award.
Great.
And it was a wonderful event. It's a small token to give him because of what he is, but you know, it's going to be great. And also, I'll be speaking at the upcoming Conspiracy Con in 2005. The link is on my website, or they can go to conspiracycon.com. Conspiracycon.com.
Okay.
I'll be speaking there with Dick Gregory and others, and my talk is going to be on the origins of evil. So it's going to, and the future of mankind.
You know, it's interesting because you say that, Michael, and oh gosh, about 3 or 4 years ago, Newsweek magazine actually had an article of where evil started.
Really?
And I mean, because it only started like in the 1800s of sin and these concepts, and before that, it was not there.
Exactly.
But this is Newsweek magazine, and a good friend of ours who is an author and very well known. As a matter of fact, he will only do our radio show. He won't do anybody else's.
I've heard about your show for a lot of time, and I am actually a person who is actually rather selective. One of the reasons why I'm not that well known is because I purposely do not choose to work with a lot of people who don't have integrity. So I say no to more gigs than I actually accept. It's just the way I am.
That's neat.
You know, because we're living in days where we have to use our discernment.
Yes, we do.
I know that my message has to get out to the people, but at the same time, I will not compromise. I will only work with people like yourself who have been doing this work for years, who have sacrificed, who are dedicated, who love humanity, who totally are dedicated to ridding this planet of its evil.
Yeah.
You know, these are the individuals I want to work with. And I told you, I'm an outsider looking in. I've been very much greeted by this community and very much loved, and it's purposely because of that. This was just a hobby. It was something I loved deeply. I never in my wildest dreams conceived of doing a book on it at all. But this was support from the people in the community, from Brian Hall, from Victoria Jack, who runs the UFO Expo.
Yeah. You
know, from the Art Bell Chat Club, from the people in Seattle, the Boeing Parapsychological Society, you name it. There's all sorts of individuals and metaphysical libraries, and basically, you know, the people of America who are now ready and waiting to hear the answer. They already were listening and looking for the answer, but see, after 9/11, let's face it, people have had the right kick in the pants now to really realize, okay, we've got to get back to doing our homework and start connecting the dots and find out what is really going on.
Have you seen a big change since 9/11?
Yes, I have. I've been here for both events, you know, before and after.
Yeah.
So I would tell you that basically before, what you would have is the very committed people who turn up, and everybody else you got to sort of beat it into them.
Yep.
And nowadays they're coming to us. Nowadays people are looking, okay, I don't know what happened with that event, but of course there's always a silver lining, you know. And I'm from Belfast, so I'm completely familiar with this philosophy. That sometimes, yes, unfortunately, it does take to be kicked in the ass, as they say, for people to get their priorities right. I'm not against it. That's the way I've lived my whole life over there. But I've seen the positive result of that, as you now see the positive result today in America. The book tables are filled with people's books on politics and on the system and on the presidents and on the Constitution. That's beautiful. Love it. Yeah. I don't care if it's pro or con. I'm just glad to see it.
Yeah, right, because it's opening people up.
It's opening people up. People are starting to read about it, learn about it. There's nothing unhealthy in that. The more information, the better. You know, Lieutenant Colonel James Bogue writes, he said, in life you must get your arms around as much of the information as you possibly can. Don't decide right away what you believe, but get your arms around as much information as you possibly can, and then you come to your conclusions. Use your own intelligence. You know, I have a great faith in the intelligence of the human race, and I know, like Jordan Maxwell, I believe that the human race will be its own salvation. It has enough of the tools. It has enough of the order. It's just that we have impediments blocking our development. It's not that we don't love God. It's not that we don't want to progress. It's not that we don't know that we are of the light. We do. We know all of this stuff. People have done spiritual work for years. Sure. If there's very little progress, it's because there's impediments. There's something literally blocking your development. If you take those blocks away, people will ascend naturally. So the role of the teacher is to actually remove those blocks from the path of the people, the seekers, you know?
Where do you think, Michael, everything is going? If it's all pointing to 2012, we are into the slide coming into that date now. where is it going? Now, we mentioned a little bit about we are coming into a different level of human consciousness. How is that going to affect this three-dimensional world we live in now, our physical bodies? Go ahead.
Well, that development is very much tied into something very physical that's going to happen, which all the ancient writings are also talking about. Do you remember about a few minutes ago you were asking me about, is there a certain event that's going to trigger?
Yeah, right.
Remember you asked me that? And I was thinking about it as we've been talking. And in fact, there is one, and I should probably bring it up now. And it ties into one of the reasons why the Western powers are in Iraq. Do you remember I was talking about the fact that the old Atlanteans lived for many hundreds of years?
Yes.
The pure alien ones, and that all we've had in the world are basically their blood descendants? Well, you see, that's not strictly true. In the book, what we have to understand is that these original alien masters aren't in fact dead. What happened was that they were buried. They were interned in certain places of the earth. They were interned in a state of undeadness, like the old vampire myths about the undead.
Almost like suspended animation.
Exactly. It's a complicated system that involves genetics and also the cutting off of the frontal lobes so that the individual goes back to sort of a limbic realm. I don't want to get into and waste time with all of that, but these individuals are incarcerated, entombed in underground caverns and cenotaphs. Not all of them, but some of them, some of the real main ones. And they've been there for at least 11,000 years. And it's the Masonic lodges and the secret societies who've kept the old records and kept the secrets of where these underground tombs are.
Yeah.
Now, one of these tombs, or more than one of them, is actually in Iraq. Because as I've been telling you, that the old dynasties of the ancient Atlantean world re-emerged in that area.
That's right.
Now, there are in other parts of the world as well. And wherever these people are buried, these entities, there's always very dark, sinister energy. That's why when you go on holiday and go to certain places to visit, you'll feel this overwhelming feeling of negative energy, you know?
Yeah.
And in other places you feel very great energy. It's because the Lemurians did the same thing. Whenever they buried one of their leaders, they'd always use harmonics, sacred geometry, beautiful structures or whatever, and they tried to commemorate their dead. Well, the dark side used to do the same thing. But, of course, they're not actually dead as we would know it.
Right.
This is what the old legends are talking about. Now, just like it says in Revelation 22, that which was, which is not, and which will be again, will emerge from the bottomless pit. Well, we have a scenario that's going to happen, is that the elites, the people at the top of the pyramid of power, if you look on the dollar bill, you'll see the pyramid of the Illuminati.
Yep.
But the pyramid has a detached capstone.
Right.
Well, those beings at the very top who are controlling the world order are now ready to disinter some of these entities, the Antichrists. And the trouble is, that's why you're getting CAT scans of the Pharaoh, and they're digging around in Egypt for the DNA of the Pharaohs, and they're making programs on Discovery Channel about it, and everybody thinks it's wonderful. No, that's just pre-accusing to how they're going to awaken these ancient souls that are incredibly evil. And if they awaken one of the, and of course they had to do it by annihilating Iraq. The ones that are buried under the desert in Iraq, you couldn't even have a normal ecostructure there. You couldn't even have a normal state situation there with Saddam Hussein looking over your shoulder while you're doing it.
Wow.
So these people went in there to create a mass genocide, which is the old plan. They've done it for thousands of years, in order to totally eradicate the country so that they can move in. And I'm not talking about America doing this. I'm talking about the people who control the countries of the world, including America. They want to go in there like a sort of an X-Files situation and slowly, over years, disinter these individuals. And the reason why they're doing this is because there is galactic alignments and changes and photonic energy coming. And they know that that's the roach cleaner on its way. Mother Nature is coming with her broom, and they're going to be annihilated. Because when the light starts getting turned up like a dimmer in a room, these individuals are not of the psychic level where they can take it. In fact, neither are most of humanity. So you were asking earlier about what might happen. As this psychic light, this photonic light, which is the highest form of material light that we could know, it's basically spiritual light. As it starts to affect our light body, we're going to be in serious trouble, the ones who have not done their spiritual homework. And guess who's going to be even in worse trouble are these dark souls. So the world power is now moving at full throttle to try and dig up their masters to see if their masters have the key of trying to get the hell out of here before this happens.
Well, Michael, are these dark forces, I guess that's a good word for them, are they the ones that have set down the different religions, the different governments that we have today, the different secret orders?
Without fail. They've been able to do that by way of the secret societies that have existed. Every single government body are telling you that by their own symbols and logos and designs. As Jordan Maxwell has shown, as my work shows, you only have to look at the symbolism of government, not let alone its deeds, to know this. And my book goes to the horse's mouth. I go to the memoirs and the records of these individuals to show you for sure who these people are. It'll be very clear to you after reading the book, or anyone who reads that, what is really going on and what is the connection. Because remember, a lot of scholars leave that big gap. They're able to talk about ancient history, like Graham Hancock and others do, and Zachariah Sitchin, but they're not actually able to show you how does the ancient masters link to the modern world? How do the leaders of today's world link directly back to these ancient warlocks? I also explain that, exactly how the continuity flows. So yes, all the religions, that's why the Masons use the double-headed eagle. The religion on one side and monarchy or autocratic, totalitarian control on the other. The double-headed eagle of Freemasonry, the cross and the crown, you're going to be suppressed in one of two ways, either by the crown, autocracy, the tyrant, or the religious psychological dumbing down of keeping you on your knees to some punitive god up in the clouds. It's worked for centuries, and it's not going to work any longer when we awaken the rest of the human race. But you see, the problem is that in the countdown to 2012, these individuals who are master astronomers, remember the dark side has some very powerful people, and they know what I'm talking about. They understand that there's going to be changes in the heavens, that there's going to be a precipitation of light, of higher spiritual light coming in, and they know that they're not going to exist. They're going to be eviscerated. They're going to be annihilated. So see, that's why there's so much quick movement now. I mean, the very word the very term New World Order implies an old world disorder, does it not? So old world disorder was the pole shift. Old world disorder was the war of the gods. Old world disorder was the deluge and the flood. They've been trying to build their new world order. But you see, nature has its own plan, its own agenda. As the universe turns, and we're going to be going through this band of photonic energy, or as I said, there's different theories about what might precipitate this spiritual rising. I'm just throwing out a few theories, like the photon belt or some constellational alignments. The Mayans are talking about the alignment with galactic center. There's so many different theories.
That's right.
Whatever precipitates it, it is very, very bad news for those debauched tyrants of old. So they're trying to disinter their own leaders, not because they got nothing better to do, but because they're in serious jeopardy of being burned out. So they have to awaken their real leaders who've got the high intelligence. And Nostradamus predicted this. There's many other scholars, like Pastor Bartholomeus, who've also talked about this disinterment. The ancient legends talk about it, that the Antichrist will arise. And we don't know what that means. We're thinking it's Saddam Hussein or, Adolf Hitler. My God, we haven't the faintest idea. We don't have the faintest idea in the wide world what that really means if one of these beings should successfully be resuscitated. It's not going to be a pretty picture.
But chances are they are going to be.
I don't really want to talk about that right now. But, there's certain things I can talk about and certain things I can't.
Okay.
I'm already going, a bit far by even talking about this, because there are occult histories of the world. There are occult histories of America, occult histories of Ireland, occult histories of Africa. The true occult history of Africa, as Anthony J. Hilder knows, has never been properly told. The occult history of America has never properly been told.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's going to be told. It's starting to be told. We're learning about alternative history, and we're going to discover something very interesting. And we need to know about the signs. We need to know about the signs of the occult symbolism of why people went to the moon, and that half an hour before they put the American flag on the moon, the same astronauts did a Masonic ceremony where they took out Masonic banners and dedicated the moon to the Masonic Lodge before they did it to the American people. How come we didn't know that? How come we didn't see footage of that? Aren't we free? What does it mean when they said the eagle has landed? Did they mean the Masonic eagle has landed? We got questions here about the symbolism. We got questions about the date. Why was the Pentagon built? The first stone was laid at the Pentagon on September 11th. Let's look into the symbolism of September 11th. Why was Lady Diana Spencer?
Wait a minute. The first stone for the Pentagon was laid on September 11th?
Yeah, the commemoration of the opening of the Pentagon. I've got all the information. It's in my coming DVDs. Did you know that Lady Diana Spencer was murdered on August 31st, 100 years to the day before that, Jack the Ripper took his first whore virgin, his first sacrificial victim.
I didn't know.
Yeah, Stephen Knight proved that the Jack the Ripper murders were orchestrated by the British royal family. You know, look at the dates, look at the times. Even 2003, George Bush declares war on Iraq on March 18th, the Feast of Purim, a very ancient festival, pagan festival, which celebrates slaughter and mayhem. And then he moves into Aries, right across the equinox. Well, why is it that the Skull and Bones Lodge is called 322, Lodge 322? That's March 22nd, the spring equinox. You see, we've got symbolism here that these people don't make a mistake when they're doing things by the sidereal calendar.
Yeah.
And to understand what they're doing, we have to be the same. We have to be equally as astute. You know, I go into all of this stuff in the book, all the quotes.
Yeah.
All the information is there for people if they're interested in this incredible subject, because it's going to matter. It's going to involve them, and it's going to involve their awakening. And some incredible stuff is going to be happening. You remember in Iraq, all the museums were robbed and looted?
I sure do.
And the whole story came out that it wasn't looters, that this stuff was methodically planned, and that these great antiquities had been stolen. What do you think those were stolen for? These are part of the ritual of awakening. I knew that was going to happen and predicted it before, because I was even talking to William Henry about this, that those objects were taken because objects like that are needed in occult rituals. The first thing they did when they got into Iraq was invade those libraries and museums and steal the antiquities, because the Harp of Ur and the Vase of Uruk and these other incredible antiquities out of there, the Mask of Bastiki, these are ancient, just like the Geronimo skull goes missing and what have you over here. So many other relics are taken because they need these ancient things because it's theirs. These are the same people that once upon a time raised the empires in Sumeria, Babylon. And now they're going back to disinter the Nephilim. And we need to know about this. You know, we're on a countdown here that's very, very serious.
Yes, it is, Michael. It's very serious, and the problem is it's only because of people like you that are putting out this knowledge that people are going to even begin to understand what truly is happening. But because if they don't, they have nobody but themselves to blame.
I agree with you, and I'm very, adamant about it, and I do have a very positive response. I mean, I see it. I mean, Richard Hoagland, for instance, he is saying that they're building a wall around the pyramid 22 feet high with gun turrets.
Yeah, they have.
There's a plan to do that. There's a plan to have it all ready and waiting just in case that this disinterment doesn't work, that they can immediately ship the bodies to the pyramid because they know that the pyramid is a perfect chamber for resuscitation, you see?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. The Egyptian government's up to all sorts of dirty tricks, all over the world. So we have to realize there's occult symbolism. There's occult dating. There's occult timings. And this is not a hard subject to learn. It's, in fact, a very interesting subject to learn because we all know the history as taught in school has got to be the most boring subject you could ever want to listen to.
That's right.
But what we have to understand is that the subject of how history has been manipulated, that is one of the most interesting of all subjects. And I find very willing audiences all over the place.
I can imagine.
Who are fascinated by this. I have a tremendous positive response everywhere I go, and I'm inundated with emails from all over the world, about the book and how it's changed people's lives.
Right.
And again, because it's synergistic, I cover a lot of ground and bring lots of things that appear to the senses to be separated. I bring them together to show that they're really all one subject. This is something I do very well, is to bring together very seemingly discordant pieces of information and show you how they fit into the bigger puzzle of things. Yeah,
because it is all part of the big puzzle. That's absolutely true.
It is true, we have to realize that the human race is its own salvation. Adolf Hitler said one thing, and it's probably the only thing he said I agree with. There is no such thing, he said, as treason against the treasonous.
That's good. I like that.
If people meditate on that, it'll actually be something that will matter.
Yeah. Michael, tell me, if you can, as much as you know about the man we refer to as Jesus Christ.
Well, I would all I will do is refer people to my website. On the website, I have a page that is, again, dedicated to the work of Jordan Maxwell, and I go into that very subject. It's a very lengthy subject, and it's not something that can be covered easily in sound bites or even on the radio.
Okay.
But I have a page on my website called Astrotheology. Astrotheology. If people are interested in that, they can look there because I have all the sources. My work is very much in the tradition of Tony Bushby, who wrote The Secret in the Bible. Is a very good book. And by the way, that brings me up to another point. My Atlantis book, I do have a distributor, one distributor only. It's hiddenmysteries.com. So just in case anyone wants to also note that, they can get it from me. They can get a signed copy from me, of course. But my distributor is also hiddenmysteries.com. I promote them because they have an incredible website where a lot of the books we've been discussing, you can go there and also get those, like the works of Tony Bushby and so on. But if anyone's interested in how the Christ myth definitely ties into what we've been talking about, I have an entire article on that is under the astrotheology pages of my website. There obviously has been many beings of that light, and in context of what we've been talking about, do you remember I was talking about how the Lemurian people were the founders of the high cultures and civilizations?
Yes.
They were the Christed ones. The concept of the Christ, in the true sense, meaning a pharaonic type of being who was basically God realized, who had united the male and female within himself. This is the tradition of the mystery school that was taught on Lemuria, when Lemuria was flourishing, before these continents sank beneath the waves. In Lemuria, that's where those secrets would have been taken. And another interesting anecdote is, do you remember I was telling you that the Adams and Eves came to Lemuria basically because of the Eve's attraction to the sons of the serpent?
Right.
Well, what would happen is that very occasionally, not a lot, but occasionally, there would be a mating or a pairing of one of the Eves with one of the sons of the serpent.
Okay.
And it didn't happen a lot because the sons of the serpent, being very wise, wanted to keep the Eves and the Adams together since they were one of the same race. But occasionally, a very specific daughter of Eve would be chosen as a consort for one of these incredibly enlightened sons of the serpent.
Right.
And when that woman joined with the son of the serpent, the term that has been given to that female was virgin queen, virgin.
Okay.
That's where it really comes from. The virgin queen who gives birth immaculately. What you got to do is replace the word immaculately in your mind with genetically, and then all will make sense.
Yep.
The seed of David, the blood of the Lamb. What these are referring to is DNA, to blood, to seeds, to immaculate conception. Immaculate conception is nothing more than a cover phrase for genetic conception. And when a female was taken by one of the sons of the serpents from Lemuria, they were referred to as the virgin, and the child that was born from that female and a son of the serpent, a Lemurian, was called born of a virgin.
A virgin, right.
So you can just, basically disregard everything else you've heard about this because it's total hogwash. Their original idea was that this was a specifically chosen female priestess who would then give birth by way of basically a very exceptional entity. And that son or daughter who went on would be exceptional. And I believe that Christ, along with Apollonius of Tyana, along with, let's say, Giordano Bruno, along with the Buddha, right?
Right.
Along with Pharaoh Thutmose, the list is endless, along with Quetzalcoatl. In Ireland we have Kukulkan, right?
Yeah.
Cuchulainn, and Lu, and Nada, and all the people we've been talking about. These are individuals who I very much believe are of that tradition. And I believe that even certain people, the Mozarts, the Beethovens, the Dalis, the Chopins of the world, are pretty much of that ilk. Obviously, they're not born in the same way I've described, but they're of the bloodline of the Lemurians. They're the ones who will always be trying to serve humanity. They're the ones who will always be creating the masterworks and dying horribly for it, as we know in the case of Wilhelm Reich and Raymond Royal Rife and what have you.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, these are these are the ones that are always the starving musician types. And then the Atlantean paradigm. Well, I think we can guess who they are. They're the opposite.
Yeah, and they're in power again today. Same ones.
Same ones.
Yeah.
Remember in Arthurian tradition, I don't know if you've looked into this, but those who've really studied Arthurian tradition always know that Arthur had a vision of two dragons fighting one another. The red dragon and the white dragon. Of course, nobody properly explained what that meant. They tried to explain it in Christian terminology. It didn't make a bit of sense.
Yep.
Well, what that really represents is nothing more than the conflict between the two sides I'm talking about. The Scots and the Welsh still have the dragon on their national coats of arms and their flag.
Well, I knew the Scots did. I didn't know about the Welsh.
Oh, yeah. The Welsh have the five-pointed dragon. the red dragon of the old Celts. They still remember this. The sons of the serpent, many of the flags of the world contain symbolism of this. Many of the streets do. Avebury is designed like a big serpent. In this country, you have the serpent at Ohio, you know, the Ohio Mound.
Yes.
Remember I was telling you that these ancients used to bury their dead?
Right.
Well, what better symbol to use near the burial chamber or on it than the serpent, because you're burying one of the sons of the serpent.
Yeah.
Well, you'll see the serpent symbol around a lot of burial grounds, a lot of tombs, and other symbols that they use. It's all encoded into that. Well, we have these two factions, the two dragons fighting each other, you know, Mordred and Arthur. We have the twins. We have Jesus and Lucifer. You know, all over the world we have the story of Cain and Abel. You know, we have the twins. In every culture of the world, we have that. In Mexico, we have the same thing.
Do you?
It's because we have it inside. We are the two twins. Each human being is a schizoid entity.
Yeah. Michael, do you think that the truth is going to manifest within people, let's say, within the next few years? It has to be within the next few years.
It already is. The seed has been planted, and it already has. I have met more people in just a short time who admittedly tell me that they were just people who just sat behind computers, who just went along to get along, but they've had sudden revelations.
Yeah.
We're going to see more of that. We're going to see more exposure of the false ones who've been claiming to be mystical, and we're going to see what rotten scum they really are. But the contradiction to that is that ordinary people who've never called themselves mystical, who've never really aspired, are going to suddenly have powerful clairvoyant visions.
Sure. Yeah.
They're just going to drop the jobs that they're doing. They're going to say, I don't need this, like Byron Katie is trying to tell people, just drop this lie, move on. You can exist for yourself. You don't have to serve the beast. Be true to yourself. Believe in yourself. God will supply, you know, the universe will give you what you want. I'm seeing more people doing that. As some people's mask is slipping to expose the lie that they are, so many other people are finding out who they really are. And it's something quite brilliant that they never even imagined. Sure, we were talking earlier about Helen Schucman, who channeled The Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
Helen Schucman is the first to tell you that she was just completely into the materialistic world, hadn't the faintest idea what was going on spiritually, couldn't care less, was eating meat and just, you know, doing her business, and suddenly had these incredible, powerful visions in which the force just came to her and told her to clean herself out, you know, and that you're going to channel this. So, yes, the truth will come, but again, it's as personal to you as your fingerprints. There is no Flash Gordon coming down from the skies to save us from ourselves. There's no returning saviors. It's each individual has their own enlightenment. This is what we've been falsely told by the religions of the world, that it's one enlightenment for everybody, like you go down to Sears and buy it and bring it home and install it. No, enlightenment is not like that. It's not bought in a box with a manual. It's completely individualistic. My enlightenment is not the same as yours. You know, everybody, my God, shouldn't it be the most private thing to you? I mean, it's logical.
Well, sure, it has to be. It has to be that way, yeah.
Yeah. We can talk about it as being the same, but see, Jesus on the cross is not the same thing as Buddha under the tree.
Right.
You know, it's not the same as Crazy Horse. On the last day that Crazy Horse lived, a man who can say, today is a good day to die, has lived more in 1 minute than most of us will live in a lifetime. Right? The people who faced the dark forces in Ireland, my ancestors stood on the battlefield with their swords drawn. They know the price of freedom. They know the price of death. They know the price of enlightenment. There are certain people in this world who have that, and the human race will have it, because you're going to find your bliss, like Joseph Campbell used to say.
Yeah,
he went blue in the face telling people, find your bliss. Well, that's coming. And sometimes the most important time to find your bliss is at the last days, when, you know, the time is dark, and you're just not going to take it anymore. It's like that old Albert Finney movie, you know, I'm sick as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. You know, and it means revivifying the belief in yourself. It means stepping outside the status quo. It means stepping outside the comfort zone, not just going along to get along and being controlled and manipulated by other people, even in your intimate circle, even in your family. The age of Aquarius says, no, I come with a sword to divide all sorts of people from each other, so that we find out who we really are on our own merit, on our own selves, and not cluster up with a group and take group consciousness and group think. This is what is really wrong. And those days are coming when individuals are either going to completely give themselves over to the kinetic battery. They're just going to become like one mind, this sort of global amorphous beast that just is groupthink, or there'll be a more individuality where people really understand that enlightenment comes as a gift to yourself and is perfectly private. Your meditation cannot be anybody else's meditation. This is what unfortunately is a big lie that we've inherited for the last 30 years in America.
Yeah.
Okay, something's better than nothing. I'm glad it happened. But, since the 60s, we've also inherited a lot of falsehoods about the nature of yoga and enlightenment and meditation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it has to come, and I think we're going to see a schism widening with the people going, just for lack of a better term, the dark side,
right,
and then people going to the light side, and it's going to get worse and worse and worse.
It is going to get worse, and one of the things that the good people, the people of the light, need to understand, and this is fundamental, it's also part of other DVDs I'm working on, is that they must not give their energy to those that they can see that are going over to the dark side. Don't try to stop them. See the ones in your midst that are the betrayers, and the ones who are showing that they are not of the light? Don't try to put a red carpet down and save them from themselves. This is what we used to do in the old day, and then what we used to do is burn our own energies out helping these individuals, saying, walk on me. Well, you know what? They will walk on you.
Oh, absolutely. Well, look around us today, Michael. That's exactly what's going on.
Isn't it? It's exactly what's going on.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Yeah. So I am not an altruist, because I believe, like Benjamin Disraeli said, the best thing that you can do for another is not to share your riches with him, but to awaken him or her to their own treasures.
Exactly.
Right? This is what people need to do. We've been riding on each other for so long, and it hasn't worked. The whole, it's like tie two birds together, though they have four wings, they cannot fly, is the old Taoist way of saying it. That, you have to fly on your own wings, and we have been leaning on everybody else and allowing other people to lean on us emotionally and spiritually and physically for far too long. So we've lost our own backbone. Nobody knows how to stand up on their own, Well, I mean, I'm fortunate that I think that one of your greatest American philosophers was Ayn Rand. I'm very much from the Ayn Rand school, and also from the Krishnamurti school, and I totally believe in self-dependence.
Good.
Both spiritually and materially.
Yeah, you would have liked her.
I would have, and I wish to God that America had listened to what that incredible lady was saying, rather than they shot her down, because they couldn't raise their exploitatory dictatorship without tears, as Aldous Huxley called it, or as George Simmel called it, the smiling depressives. We couldn't have that system today, you see, if they'd let somebody like her loose.
Well, there were a lot of people who she reached, a lot of people who worked with her, and those are the people that are going out all over the world today and making a difference. I'm
very happy to hear it, because she changed my life when I was 14, and I didn't understand really too much about it, but I got enough of what the incredible woman was saying to make a very big impact on my soul, and then later my mind sort of caught up with it, 30 years later, but it was instilled inside, spiritually speaking,
That's good. I'm very proud of you.
But I want to make it very clear to everyone listening that enlightenment is not to be shared. The idea that it can be communal is a mistake. I think it was a well-meaning mistake, because we tried to inherit a lot of this mysticism from the Far East, which, of course, in a raped and debauched Western society, we turned in the 60s to look to Eastern religions, and they look all very exotic and holy. But in fact, they're nothing more than the Christianity of the East. Just a little bit more decoration, a little more exotica. But unfortunately, those are still some patriarchal, ruthless, suppressive religions of the East. They might look very profound from our sterile side. But what we have to realize is that there was also a Western mystery tradition, a Western magical tradition coming out of Egypt of tarot, astrology, Kabbalah, numerology. We had our own mystery tradition. We didn't need to look to the Far East. They have theirs, we have ours. And, that was very important. And with that Western magical tradition comes this idea that nobody can walk your path but you. And
that's true.
You want to walk it yourself, because the enlightenment is not about the goal. Enlightenment is actually the path that you walk on, not the goal.
It's interesting, Michael. Many years ago when I was doing a lot of lecturing, and it was right when everybody was looking for a guru.
Yeah.
And I would always start my lectures, and I could have 5,000 and 6,000 people. And I would tell them, I said, if you're looking for a guru, do not come to me, because each of you is your own guru.
That's right.
And if you go to somebody, and it's just like you're saying now, Michael, the people that are looking for a teacher as such, number one, they don't have the confidence in themselves to do it. But number two, if you take on a teacher, then your level or degree of enlightenment can only be up to and probably a little below where that teacher is.
Exactly, and I think that one of the other reasons why we do it is ego defenses. if we go wrong on the path, then we don't have to take personal responsibility.
Sure.
We can always turn around at the end of the day and go, oh, well, wait a minute, he made me do it.
That's right. That's right.
I'm just a follower. It's the classic old escape route,
Yeah.
you know, and it's not going to be good enough to cut any kind of, you know, ice today. You know, I'm from the school of Krishnamurti, where there's a tremendous emphasis on the idea of your own self-realization. I mean, let's put it this way. In the Celtic tradition, the Arthurian tradition, everybody who's even opened a coffee table book on the Arthurian tradition knows about the symbol of the round table.
Yes.
I mean, it's the most central motif that you could imagine when you're studying the myths of England and Ireland. Well, what does the bloody round table, excuse my Irish, represent? That no one man is head. It's a round table.
That's right.
It is the coming together of all the knights. It's the coming together of all the minds, all the brothers and sisters who make kinship or kingship. They've turned that upside down today. We have hierarchies instead of holarchies. We've got this totally patriarchal, phallocratic, you know, over hyper-driven masculine situation.
Yeah,
and
right.
that is the age that is coming to its end. Nothing more. But at the beginning of civilization, you've got upheaval, and at the end, you've got certain upheaval. That upheaval will be physical, yes, and it will be economic, yes, certainly, and it will be militaristic also. But as a spiritual person, I am not looking to that. I am interested in that, but could not be a spiritual teacher if I was not also putting the main emphasis on the psychological upheaval. That is where the spiritual person must keep their focus.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you start thinking exoterically, well then, you know, you're just some sort of a savant, or you are a well-meaning activist, or whatever. You're of a different category. The spiritualist, the occultist, the metaphysician understands that those things will come about, those tribulations, but his main focus is on the psyche of the human being.
Yeah,
you know, and that's where my focus is definitely is. That's
Michael,
the old shamanic way.
Yep, and Michael, my friend, I want to thank you because we're almost out of time. You've got to come
thank
back.
You. Again, if people want to get hold of the book, they can just contact me directly. You know, you can get a signed copy. Contact me at 206-527-2968, or just go onto the website at tarotscopes.com. Go to the Atlantis page. Tarotscopes is all one word with one T, plural. Tarotscopes, Taroscopes. You know, I hope we can do this again, Alex, because it's great to be on with people like yourself who really care about humanity and are doing the true work. And we will have your link on our website. I'll set that up tomorrow, because your book and books, you know, we only talked about this, the latest book, but you have 6 other books. I have 6 books coming out, and I've also got 6 new DVDs coming out by April, and I will send you a complimentary set of the whole box set, because I want you to share it in my work, because I talk about a lot of other things as well. They're all featured on my website, all the different products that are coming out, because this is a time for answers and truth. It is. Michael Tsarion, thanks, my friend. You take care. God bless, and I'll be in touch, too, real soon. Absolutely. Carry on, and thank you so much for giving me this moment. My pleasure. To share with your audience. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Michael Tsarion, everybody. I mean, what an amazing young man. Let me tell you, you get his book, it will absolutely amaze you, the information that he has in it. Interesting. Maybe I enjoy it so much because if you heard some of the people who he knows, some of the people he holds in high esteem, I do too. And because I'm older, I've had an opportunity of personally knowing a lot of them. So anyway, my friends, I will be back tomorrow night. And let me tell you, as Jim McCanny and I talked about last night, tomorrow night we have Dr. Gary McMurtry from the University of Hawaii, and we are going to talk about some of the potential world events that can happen, natural events, and how it could affect all of us. But I think it's things like this that we truly do have to know. Thanks for listening, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. God bless us all, and I mean it sincerely, because we really do need it. And there's got to be a way that we can get together and get all this information. I'm Alex Merkling, everybody. This is Mysteries of the Mind on the Millennium Radio Network. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.